Whatever we are doing in life, that's all because of consciousness. You are not it. You are not that negativity. You're not that depression. Nor are you depressed. Bhaja Govindam. Prapte sannihite marane nahi nahi rakshati dukkhin karane. When death is close, at the point of death, Sanskrit grammar is not going to save you. Worship Govinda, Krishna. Worship Govinda, O fool, worship Govinda. Devotion.
Namaste, everyone. Today is a very special day for me because I have on the show who I consider my guru, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. This is our second podcast with him, and words cannot describe who he is. And I'm sure that when you listen to this podcast, you'll be able to learn a lot. And overall, he's the most humble person ever. So I would love to welcome you, Swami Sarvapriyananda ji, to the show once again under the tree. Thank you so much for taking out your time to be here.
Thank you for having me here, Amira. Once again.
Swamiji, I just completed my education in consciousness studies and human potential. So basically studied everything from Bhagavad Gita to Hinduism to knowing thyself. Who am I? This really answering this big question. I want to just start off this podcast with talking to you about, for viewers who may not actually know, who am I? Because it's something we consider just to be, I am Amira, or I am a student, or I'm a podcaster, or I'm this. What is this question really comprised of, and why is it actually necessary for us to know thyself? So just the basics, if you can start off with.
Right. And I'm so glad to know that you studied consciousness, that consciousness studies is a thing now, and it's becoming more and more popular. There are some reasons I'd just like to mention before we go deep into it. The reasons why right now at this time, in our time, consciousness studies has become so important. Mm-hmm. I was seeing Oxford University Press. If you Google it, you'll find 5 great unsolved questions in philosophy by Oxford University Press. But if you look at the 5 questions, 4 of the questions are related to consciousness.
Right.
One question is, who am I? That's one big question in philosophy. Second question is, do we have free will? Third question is, do we know anything at all? I mean, how do we know anything? Question of skepticism and knowledge. Then the fourth question is death. What happens at death? Not the physical side of it. That, of course, is well known. But the consciousness side of it. What happens to consciousness at death? And the 5th question was about global justice. But 4 questions, you see, directly related to consciousness. Another reason why consciousness studies has suddenly become very important in the last 20-25 years is this new technology. This technology of scanning the brain has improved dramatically in the last 20-25 years. They have got something called fMRI now, functional MRI, which they can trace very minute activity in the brain, different areas of the brain, and then they can correlate with our experiences, conscious experiences. So that has led to sudden boom of interest in consciousness studies. Another reason why this consciousness studies is very important today is because of this new, internet, especially AI. Suddenly, these computers are doing things which we thought were the province of human beings. Decision making, like driving a car.
Yeah.
ChatGPT, especially right now.
Brilliant.
It's an amazing thing. It's writing poems and short stories. There are now, just before I came, somebody in New York, a visitor was demonstrating to me a new AI which will make films for you. You just have to, Sora, I think it's called. You just give it a text prompt and it'll make a film for you. Everything it'll do for you. Just tell it what to do, it'll do it. There is AI which paints pictures. There is AI which writes stories and composes poems. So creativity in many dimensions. So again, the question arises, what is consciousness then? So this rise of AI also has sparked interest in what consciousness is. And finally, there's a philosophical question, which I'm sure we'll come to, called the hard problem of consciousness, the inability to explain consciousness with just the brain or nervous system. So for all these reasons, and many more reasons I'm sure, there's a sudden burst of interest in consciousness, And now you have subjects, amazing and wonderful subjects like consciousness studies, which you have studied. Coming to your question about this know thyself, there is an ancient interest in consciousness studies, not just this modern consciousness studies. Um, the philosopher Evan Thompson, he's written his book, Waking, Dreaming, Being. He starts his book by saying that consciousness studies is not a new discipline. It started 5,000 years ago in the Indo-Gangetic plains in the texts called the Upanishads. So people were already investigating what consciousness is. In fact, he says that these Upanishads are so important in human thought that we should do well to date our history not with AD and BC, but before Upanishad and after Upanishad.
And can I just ask you, when you're talking about Upanishads, because I would like to also tell the viewers that I am taking classes from you on the Mundukya Upanishad. And I mean, if there's like one sentence, I think, if I'm not wrong, that you have to sum up that specific Upanishad, is that if there's a one thing you need to know, that you know everything from, is that, you know, I am that, I am Brahman.
Yeah, right.
So for Upanishads, how many Upanishads are there? And I mean, are the core teachings kind of similar with what you're talking about?
Yes. So the Upanishads are found in the as part of the holy texts of the Hindus called the Vedas. So in the Vedas, the final teachings of the Vedas, the highest or the deepest spiritual teachings of the Vedas, are found in these texts called Upanishads. These are very ancient, and there are a large number of them. There is a well-known list of 108 Upanishads, but there are more than that actually. 10 of them, arguably 11, are more important than the rest, mainly because about 1200, 1300 years ago, Adi Shankaracharya, he selected those 10 or 11 in some accounts to write commentaries. So he developed the whole system of Vedanta, or non-dual Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta, based on these Upanishads, and especially these 10 Upanishads. There's a nice verse which names these 10 Upanishads. Isha kena katha prashna mundamandukya titirihi aitareyam cha chandogyam brihad aranyakam tatha. So 10 Upanishads are named here. Now, the message of all the Upanishads, to keep it simple, I'll stick to non-dual Vedanta, which is my home tradition. The message of all these Upanishads actually is very easy to state. It is, you are that. That means the ultimate reality of the universe. There is an ultimate reality of the universe. And we, sentient beings, we are that. And what is that ultimate reality of the universe? It is variously expressed as pure existence, Sat, or pure consciousness, Chit, or pure bliss, Ananda. This is the conclusion that the Upanishads arrive at. Satchidananda, existence, consciousness, bliss. It sounds cool. It is cool. It's the ultimate in coolness. But this is the essence of the teaching, that you are that, Tattvamasi, or I am Brahman, the ultimate reality. This is the essence of the Upanishads. But the rest of the text and the commentaries and the sub-commentaries and multiple independent texts based on the Upanishads, which have been written by great masters throughout the millennia of Indian history, of Indian civilization, they have built upon these teachings.
Mm-hmm. And I think let's just dive into now, what exactly is the hard problem of consciousness? And I know that's a term that was coined by David Chalmers, and I believe he's a professor at NYU, or...
Yeah, he's an Australian philosopher of mind. In fact, if you look up the 10 greatest living philosophers, you have to say living philosophers, otherwise you'll get Plato and Aristotle and all. But if you say Google 10 greatest living philosophers, I would wager that you will get David Chalmers. So he's one of the greatest philosophers living today. He's Australian. He's a philosopher at the New York University. They have probably the best analytic philosophy department in the world, and especially the area which is of interest to us, the philosophy of mind. That's a part of philosophy, the philosophy of mind. That's where they study mind and consciousness. So he's the one who coined the term, the hard problem of consciousness. Now, what is the hard problem of consciousness? To understand it better, we can contrast it with the so-called quote-unquote easy problem, which are not easy, which will require a lot of hard work, but they're easy in a certain sense. What is that? Behind it all is the idea that the brain is producing consciousness. Now, when they study the brain and you find activity in some parts of the brain with your scans, and the person whose brain you're studying, that person says, oh, there's a pain in my right hand now. And you see this part of the brain lights up. Oh, I'm remembering a red rose now. And that part of the brain lights up. So you now say that this part of the brain is connected with the experience of pain in the right hand. That part of the brain, those bunch of neurons are connected with the memory of a red rose. So this is a science of correlations. Brain activity correlated with the reported conscious experience of the subject. And you can sort of map what's going on in the brain.
Get a good idea.
You can get a good idea. I guess I'm not a neuroscientist, and an actual practicing neuroscientist, they told me it's more complicated than that. And it's actually quite messy. It's not as precise as that. But the general principle we understand. So this is one kind of neuroscience. This is one side of the science of consciousness. But the other side, what he calls a hard problem is, why should electrical activity in living tissue in one organ of the body cause you to have conscious experiences? What is the connection between a burst of electricity here and a pain? What is the connection between a burst of electricity somewhere here, tiny, tiny burst of electricity in some little neurons, and Einstein coming to the discovery of E is equal to mc square? Where is the connection? We are all seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting. We have a vivid experience of life, like an internal movie. This is the word that David Chalmers uses. We have like an internal movie which is going on, playing in our heads. But if you look in the heads, there is no movie. If you scan the skull of a living person with the most finest of instruments, most sophisticated of instruments, you will not see sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. You will not see E is equal to mc square. You will not see art, philosophy, religion, nothing. You will just see tiny electrical activity, neurochemicals floating around. That's all that you will see. Where is the connection?
You can't track someone's memories, or honestly, I think even at this point, there's no technology that can do mind reading, right?
They're trying, but the question is deeper. Why at all physical, biological processes are experienced subjectively as our life? It's a very big question, because consciousness is our life. Whatever we are doing in life, that's all because of consciousness. And yet, how is this consciousness related to the brain? How is the brain producing consciousness? There's some relationship, there's no doubt about it. That's the easy problem. But how at all can you... Correlation is not causation.
There's no proof of
it. It's not an explanation. So they calls it an explanatory gap. So he uses the term qualia. Qualia means what does it feel like? Have a cup of coffee, you feel the warmth of it, the flavor of it, the aroma of it. Warmth, flavor, aroma, none of them are in the brain.
You can't really describe that either.
Yeah, and there's tiny bits of electrical activity. How does that become warmth and flavor and aroma in your experience, living experience? There is a big gap here somewhere. And this is called the hard problem of consciousness. And it actually exists. Another philosopher put it nicely, Galen Strawson. He said there is actually no hard problem of consciousness. We are all conscious. There is no doubt about that. We are all conscious right now. We are aware. We are conscious. Now you have made up your mind that somehow brain is producing consciousness. And now you can't explain how brain is producing consciousness. Now you're calling it hard problem. But why are you assuming that brain is producing consciousness at all? It could be that the brain is an instrument. It's like people are coming into the room through the door. Through the door, people are coming into the room. Now, all of us, we have entered this room through that door. Now, if somebody says, oh, the door is so powerful, it produced so many people. It didn't produce people. We came in through the door.
The door was just an instrument.
An instrument. It could be that the brain is an instrument that consciousness uses for functionality. Clearly, the brain is related to consciousness. Now, this is a question. This is called the hard problem of consciousness.
I think I just want to share a little personal experience, and maybe you can kind of describe that in the context of consciousness. So, for example, just a few days ago, I was having an argument with my mom, and during that conflict, I was basically able to because I have this knowledge now. So I was able to witness. Essentially, it's like there was a thought in my mind that, okay, this is happening. I'm able to observe the entire situation, observe that this is happening and I'm reacting.
Yes, yes. So you're able to observe the person Amira.
Yes, that's what strange thing was. It was like almost if it was another identity and I was able to observe it, and I could stop it afterwards. So that was...
And that one, which is observing the person Amira arguing with her mom, that one cannot exactly be the same as the person Amira. It's almost like the person Amira is a mask which you are wearing. In fact, the very word person means mask. I was amazed to discover that in ancient Greece, they used to have these plays. They would stage these plays. And each actor would come on stage in that amphitheater, and they would hold these huge masks which represented a character, and they would speak through the mask. Sona means sound. Persona is that mask through which you speak. So person really means a mask. You are not the person. The person depends on you for its existence. You are manifesting the person, but you are not literally the person. Just as you put a mask on my face, I am not the mask. Mask is not my real face, but I operate through the mask. You operate through the person Amira. Yeah, that's a very good point that you've just raised.
Kind of proof that like the real I is pure. It's pure, but the reactions are just either conditionings or some type of like behavior from environment or what we've learned from last life that's coming through the real I.
Yeah.
Is that kind of a way to explain?
Yeah, pure in the sense, not in the sense of whether it's good or bad, pure or impure, not in that sense. Like the body may be pure or impure, the mind may be pure or impure. But consciousness, the real I, is pure in the sense that it's only consciousness. It's not mixed with anything else. So it's just awareness. You can say it just isness. Or it just shines, it's awareness. And this sounds abstract, it sounds mystical, but it isn't. Vedanta will say that it's just a fact. It's in fact the most obvious fact of our lives. Just as we are all sitting here, but all of this is illumined by one light. Person might say, oh, there are chairs, there's Amira, there's the chair, there's the microphones, there's Swami. But the fact is, all of this is just, light is reflecting of all of this and coming to our eyes, and that's why we are able to see. Similarly, we are this one light in which appears the personality with thoughts and emotions and the body and the world and its interactions. Yeah. So it's pure in that sense as just isness or just awareness.
Just on that context, in the context of Advaita Vedanta also, I want to play like a little, it's like rapid fire where I'm going to give you a situation, a real life situation where someone's in, and you tell me like if someone knows their true identity or who am I, how do they react to that in the best way so they don't suffer. So, for example, I'm a student who's preparing for, let's say if you're in India, it's like the IAS exams, or in the US, Harvard, Ivy Leagues. And I've spent years and years preparing and putting my heart and soul. But maybe due to some luck, destiny, karma, whatever you call it, I don't get success. That causes failure, that causes depression, suicidal thoughts. That's the innate reaction I'm feeling. How do I use this knowledge to then solve my issue?
You immediately see that there is this negative reaction, unhappiness, a shock, misery. It appears like a wave. It's not that I am shocked or I am in deep misery or I am a failure, I am a loser, I am in deep depression. No, I feel that wave of negativity arising. I am that limitless awareness, like the blue sunlit sky in which a cloud has suddenly appeared. And it's not just being poetic or being rhetorical. You actually see it like that. So this wave of a negative reaction arises. The moment you see it as an object, an interesting thing happens. First of all, you see you are not it. You are not that negativity. You are not that depression. Nor are you depressed. If there is rainfall. Everything will get wet, but space itself doesn't get wet.
It's also temporary.
It's
Rain
temporary.
comes
It's
and goes.
temporary, and it doesn't affect the space itself. It can affect the air. It can affect the house or the trees, but space itself is not affected by heat, moisture, nothing. It just gives space for everything. Similarly, you are like that space, completely unaffected. Then when this arises in the mind, this cloud, the second thing that will happen is when you see yourself as a difference with that, that begins to subside much faster. You see, our negativities affect us much more when we are involved with it.
When you're attached to it.
Attached to it. We hug it to ourselves. It's strange. We hug our unhappiness to ourselves also by identifying, I am unhappy. This is a fact of my life. No, it isn't. Just a moment ago, you were not unhappy. The same consciousness which saw the relaxed and pleasant state of mind is now witnessing the absolute turmoil and distress of the mind. Then the turmoil and distress also go down. This is the next thing that will happen. And then it will disappear into that limitless awareness again from which it arose. And you know that you were that limitless, unaffected awareness earlier, during the turmoil, and now also after the turmoil. You are fine. The more you do this, the more the initial reaction also will be less. So when a shock comes, you see, you distance yourself from the negativities. But when you keep on doing that, the negativities themselves will they'll begin to diminish. The reactions will become less and less sharp and less troublesome. There'll be a general peacefulness, general luminosity in the mind all throughout.
And just one more situation now I would like to give you is that, let's say there's an individual, if they're, for example, a married couple, and through whatever life experiences they have to go through a divorce, maybe it's destined to happen, it's karma, whatever you call it, or if someone faces a heartbreak or betrayal in a relationship, someone they trust a lot. In that situation, that's even sometimes worse because it's relationships which we know how it gets very hurtful and deep. So how do you react to that, especially when you know you're parting away from someone in that situation?
Negativities in human relationships of whatever kind, from the perspective of Vedanta, you know first and foremost, you and that other person, you are one reality. That other person is not different from you. The one consciousness which is there in this body and mind, shining forth through this, is exactly there in that other person also. That other person is not one bit different from you. Now, that person is behaving in a particular way. Suppose it's behaving in an unpleasant way, negative way. We can't handle that. It's because of the mask of the personality, of the mind, the conditioning of the mind. Which here also there is a conditioning of the mind. There also, every body mind has its own conditioning. So sometimes those conditionings have accumulated a lot of negativity over lifetimes. And that's why the behavior is like that. People ask, if everybody is that one Atman, or if God is in everybody, then why is one person evil? Why is another person lazy? Another person so good? How can it all be the same? It is. It's the same light when it streams through stained glass windows. Same light, sunlight coming, but from inside the hall, you will see different rays of light coming, red and blue and all. Why? It's the same light, but it came through those stained glass windows, right? So similarly, the one consciousness which you are with that person with whom you are having a conflict, that light coming through that particular mind is behaving in that way. So that gives us a lot of sympathy for the other.
Understanding, basically.
Understanding, lot of sympathy. Will that solve the problem? Not necessarily. Our conditionings are very strong. So it's not so easy to change ourselves, imagine how difficult it is to change another person. But first of all, it will give you a lot of peace within, a lot of centeredness within. See, anger against somebody, it is unwise because anger is like a fire. And a fire always burns the place where you light it. It can burn others, but first of all, it will burn the place where you light it. If I light the fire of anger in my heart, I am foolish because the first person to get burned by that anger will be I. I am going to get affected first. So I will not be angry at anybody or anything. And with understanding, with sympathy, with this feeling of oneness, it affects the other person also. So in many difficult situations, you'll see the situation becomes a little less difficult. Is it a magic solution for everything? No, there's no magic solution for everything. But it's much better. First of all, you are the beneficiary. When you have this peaceful state of mind and this witness consciousness, you are the first beneficiary. But then the other person and the situation also becomes better. Notice, this is how life is. In Ashtavakra says, Mai ananta mahambodo ascharyam jiva vichaya udyanti gnanti khelanti pravishanti swabhavata. In me, the limitless ocean of consciousness. How wonderful are these sentient beings, the jivas. Udyanti, they arise. Gnanti, khelanti, they play. Gnanti, they fight. Pravishanti, they disappear. They merge back into consciousness. Swabhavata, by their own nature. I remember this master who was teaching us this particular verse. This is exactly what you referred to. So the old Swami in Gangotri, he was saying, see, look at you around in life. People arise from their born, childhood, youth. Khelanti, they play. I love you. Gnanti, they fight. I will divorce. What you just said. And then they all disappear. After some time, 30, 40, 50, 100 years later, they're all gone. More beings arise. But you have not come with those beings. You are not disappearing with those beings. You are this limitless consciousness in whom all of these things are appearing and disappearing. Imagine the calmness, the deep sympathy, the deep peace it gives you, even in times of trouble.
It's a very, very good explanation. I can say that because personally, I feel like I've just been able to actually learn more towards myself. I think for people watching, it would actually help them in real life.
I think so. It's people think Vedanta is philosophical, theoretical.
Or whatever you said is just, this is reality.
It's reality. It's more real than anything else.
Yeah. I think going back to also the last topic I would like to touch upon is you were talking about Adi Shankaracharya. You mentioned him a little bit earlier when I think you were talking about the Upanishads. And I think he was believed to be an incarnation of Lord Shiva. So Kashmiri Shivism is something I've been interested in. And just if, I know we don't have too much time, but if like you can go in a brief description of what that path is, and that's I think also falls into the non-dual category, but how is it different from the pathway of Advaita Vedanta?
Yes. Adi Shankaracharya was one of the greatest figures in the history of Indian spirituality. He lived about 1300 years ago. He was born in Kerala, but he belonged to all of India because he traveled across the length and breadth of India more than 1,000 years ago, reviving and reforming Hinduism, and especially establishing the path of non-dual Vedanta, which already existed. But he gave it a firm foundation by writing the commentaries on the essential texts, on the Upanishads, Bhagavad Gita, Brahma Sutra, and so on, and multiple other texts, but also multiple devotional traditions. There's so many beautiful hymns that Adi Shankaracharya has written. And it was in present-day Madhya Pradesh, in what is called Omkareshwar, Adi Shankaracharya, as a young boy of 12, he came and met his guru, Govindapada, who was the disciple of a great non-dualist, Gaurapada, the author of the Mandukya Karika. So I have just come yesterday from Bhopal. The government of Madhya Pradesh has got this new project called the Ekatma Dham, the place of oneness. That's the central message of Adi Shankaracharya and the central message of Advaita Vedanta, oneness, the oneness of all existence. And they have established a 108-foot statue of Shankaracharya in Omkareshwar, and they're establishing a huge institute in the name of Shankaracharya. All right. So oneness. Ekatma means oneself. It's not just some external oneness. A physicist can talk about oneness, the unified theory which explains everything in the universe. But there also the physicist, as if stands apart from it. I'm trying to understand this. But Vedanta says this oneness is you. We think I am this body, or I'm this mind, this person. Vedanta says only superficially. really speaking, you are this underlying oneness where the entire universe is one. And this is called Brahman or Atman. Ekatma, oneself. Now, this is also non-dual. Non-dual in the sense, there is nothing in the universe which constitutes a separate reality apart from Brahman or Atman, you. So there is nothing in the universe, nobody in the universe which is other than you. The real you, not the person. As a body, of course, there are so many other people. As a person, also so many other persons. But as this being, consciousness, bliss, Satchidananda, there's nothing other than that. Everything else, you will say, what's all this? This is all an appearance in that. That reality is appearing in these ways. Just like a movie screen appears as a movie. Screen appears as all kinds of movies. Just like your dreaming mind appears as a dream with so many people and events, but all the time, even when you're experiencing the dream, really it's just your mind which is dreaming all that. When you're experiencing this world, it's really just existence, consciousness, bliss. So that's Advaita Vedanta. Now, that's not the only non-dual tradition. There are a number of non-dual traditions in Indian spirituality, in Indian philosophy. The most well-known is, of course, Advaita Vedanta, non-dual Vedanta. But there is Kashmiri Shaivism, which is non-dual Shaivism. There are arguably at least two streams of Mahayana Buddhism, the Yogachara Vijnanavada and the Madhyamaka Shunyavada, which also are non-dual. At least they refer to themselves as being non-dual. So we have to take them at their word. These are all non-dual traditions. How are they different? Especially Advaita Vedanta and Kashmiri Shaivism, there are some stark differences. So Advaita Vedanta says there is one limitless existence, consciousness, bliss, and the entire universe is an appearance. Whereas Kashmiri Shaivism doesn't call the universe an appearance. It says that there's one limitless existence, consciousness, bliss, which it calls Para Shiva. Shiva or Para Shiva.
Are they devotees of Lord Shiva?
Yes, they are devotees of Lord Shiva.
They think he's the supreme
He's
being.
supreme being, the devotees. But they will say the universe is not false. It's not an appearance. It's not a dream.
Mithya, it's not Mithya.
It's real. It's not Mithya. It's real. Then what is the relation? Then how can it be non-dual? Because if you have an ultimate reality, Brahman or Shiva, and a reality called the universe, then you have two.
Yeah, there's dualist.
There's a duality to it.
Yeah.
Advaita Vedanta doesn't have that problem because it says what appears as the universe, it's an appearance. Appearance and reality, you cannot count them together. If there's a rope and a snake, the rope is appearing as a snake, you don't say there are two things. There is one thing being mistaken as something else. There's a rope which is real and one it's being mistaken as the snake. The rope is non-dual with respect to the snake. But the snake does not exist as a second thing. But the moment you say the world is real, it exists, then how are you going to say it's non-dual? How is Shiva non-dual? How is Kashmiri Shaivism non-dual? Well, they say the world is real and it is none other than Shiva. Shiva is not appearing as the world. Shiva manifests. They have a theory of vibrations, spanda. The ultimate reality is pure consciousness. They call it vibration, spanda. They call it play of consciousness. So, vilasa, the play of consciousness. The term they use is chid vilasa, the play of consciousness. So, consciousness plays as this universe. At no time is it anything other than Shiva. So, all of these are Shiva. All of this is one consciousness. But there's no reason to say it's false.
So in Kashmiri Shaivism, because like you said, they don't consider it that this is Mithya or false, is that why you see sometimes that devotees of Lord Shiva perform like sometimes what you would call like tantric rituals or Vanmarg or dark side of Hinduism? There's different terms for it.
So Kashmiri Shaivism has a vast range of practices. So in Advaita Vedanta, it's pretty simple. Advaita Vedanta, you are Brahman. You don't know it. And the solution is to know it. How do you know something? You inquire into it. How do you inquire into it? You listen to the teachings, you reason it out, and then once you have got the understanding, you stay with it in meditation until it becomes clear to you that you are Brahman. Ignorance is the problem, that you don't know you are Brahman. Knowledge that you are Brahman is the solution. Done. All other practices are supplementary. They are useful. They can purify your mind. They can concentrate your mind. They can clean up your life. Dharma, bhakti, dhyana, all of these are supplementary. But core is enlightenment, knowledge. That's Advaita Vedanta. It's plain and simple. It's very straightforward. Whereas in Kashmiri Shaivism, they have that also, what I'm talking about, but they have a wide range of other things. So they have what is called 4 ways of becoming enlightened, 4 broad paths. One is called Anupaya, no path. You can just become enlightened. You might say that sounds crazy, but there is evidence of people spontaneously awakening. Even now, there are some people, who is that power of now, Eckhart Tolle. If you read his life,
yes,
something like the spontaneous awakening.
Yeah.
There are some such people.
And suffering was a because of that.
Yes.
Sometimes that happens.
And the most classic example of our time is that of Ramana Maharshi. With no effort or almost very little effort, he awakened to the reality.
Or some saints like Paramahansa Ramakrishna, Ramana Maharishi, Neem Karoli Baba, they're enlightened.
Yes, but in the case of Neem Karoli Baba, Parama, and Sri Ramakrishna, of course, you see tremendous amount of sadhana being performed. It's true that it is for our instruction, but they did that sadhana and then they show it as the result of that sadhana. But so Anupai would be no sadhana, you've just become awakened. But of course, we can't sit around waiting for that to happen. So the second thing is called Shambhava Upai, the way of Shambhu or way of Shiva. That's very much like Advaita Vedanta. There are teachings, there are pointers which are given to you. And then you contemplate that, you realize that you are Shiva. You are one with Shiva. You are that
it's
Shiva.
Complete Jnana Yoga.
Jnana Yoga, yeah.
Okay.
It's exactly like Jnana Yoga. I'll just add a little bit here, like a footnote. I consider it like Jnana Yoga, but there are actual experts in Kashmiri Shaivism. They will say, no. Your Advaita Vedanta is like the 3rd path, but the way of Shiva is something higher than... Anyway, it doesn't matter. I consider it to be like Jnana Yoga, like Advaita Vedanta. Now, suppose that doesn't work. Then it gets progressively more complicated. Not because the Shiva is complicated, not because enlightenment is complicated. We are complicated. We means our minds. We have made our lives and minds complicated. And that's why we need these special methods. So the 3rd level is called Shakta Upai, the way of Shakti or way of the Divine Mother. So where there is meditation, where there is mantra. And then if that is not enough, then there is something called Anva Upai. Anu means atom. It means the little one or the Jiva, us. Right now, us means not as Shiva, as we find ourselves right now, as limited beings. Then he said, you start there. And that is called Anva Upai. They're all rituals, devotion, what you mentioned, various kinds of practices, devotional practices, tantric practices, variety of rituals. So this is a very broad and little oversimplified way of putting it. So you see, the very wide range of practices are there compared to Advaita Vedanta. Advaita Vedanta is sort of a direct path. Yeah.
Last question, I have to kind of go back in a full circle, is because I was studying consciousness studies. When we talk about the states of consciousness, so like we all know, like dreaming, waking, sleeping, all these, the 3 regular states. Then there's Turiya state, which I believe is also known as the 4th state or transcendental consciousness. And then I guess it's a different path. Like, I've heard of, for example, then there's states of consciousness known as cosmic consciousness, unity consciousness, God consciousness. People say there's 7 or 8 paths. I just want to get some clarity on exactly how many states are there, where we have to achieve in the field of what you're talking about.
Advaita Vedanta, thankfully, is very simple. It doesn't use the term states of consciousness.
Okay. It goes to Turiya.
Yeah.
It talks about
so
Turiya.
States are physical states or mental states. State means something that can change. Pure consciousness itself never changes. Nothing ever happens there. It just shines. So it doesn't have any states. It just is. A good example is gold and ornaments. So you can make the gold into a bracelet. You can make it into a necklace. You can make it into a ring. So these are different states of the gold, if you want to call it state. These are different ornaments. But the gold is the same. It's the same gold. Similarly, consciousness being one and the same, the mind awakes, and that's what we call the waking state. The mind falls asleep and dreams. That's what we call the dream state. And then the mind goes into deep sleep. That's what we call the deep sleep state. So these are states of the mind, and they are all illumined by one consciousness, which we are. With respect to these three, waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, we talk about a fourth, the real consciousness, which is. But the fourth one is not a fourth state. It is the one consciousness shining on these three states. So you are this one limitless awareness, and you are shining on your in and through your waking state, in and through the dream state, in and through the deep sleep state. These states belong to the mind, and you are the same in all three. That you, the real you, is called Turiya. Turiya, literally, the Sanskrit word means fourth. Yeah. So it's not a fourth state of consciousness. It is the reality. Consciousness itself, it's one and the same in all three states. Yeah. And then you can expand it further. God consciousness would mean, two meanings could be there. One is God, Ishvara, Bhagavan, the Lord of the universe. So what would be the experience of God as, the whole cosmos is my body. All minds are my mind. That would be God consciousness. Or another meaning of God consciousness would be actually God realization. When we sentient beings, we realize Shiva or God. Yeah, in this way, you can conceive of multiple ways of looking at it. But Advaita Vedanta is pretty simple. One witness.
And worst to worst case, if someone's watching this who maybe feels that Gyan Yoga is not their path, right? Or maybe going in the intellectual way is not something they're too fond of. I think Adi Shankaracharya, there was some story, I think, where he found this old man. I think he was very old, and he was trying to read some scripture, and he wasn't able to, or something like that. And then Adi Shankaracharya said something along the lines of Bhaj Govindam.
Yes, but the very famous, maybe the most famous stotra hymn composed by Adi Shankaracharya, Bhaja Govindam. He says, Prapte sannihite marane nahi nahi rakshati dukkrin karane. When death is close, at the point of death, your Sanskrit grammar, that person was memorizing grammar rules. Sanskrit grammar is not going to save you. Worship Govinda, Krishna. Worship Govinda, oh fool, worship Govinda. So, devotion. Sri Ramakrishna put it this way very beautifully. He said, as many faiths, so many paths to God. As all the religions in their different ways will lead you to enlightenment. All the practices, devotion. Can you become enlightened without all these Advaita Vedanta and all of that? Just suppose someone is devoted to Krishna or to Shiva. And by sheer devotion and love, can you become enlightened? Certainly. This is the beauty of Sri Ramakrishna. He says, certainly. And the proof is that there have been so many saints in history, in our country, especially in India, but also in other religions and other parts of the world, who have attained enlightenment, God realization, whatever you call it, through devotion, and only through devotion. Can you do it through meditation? Yes. If you take the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, they tell you the way to attain enlightenment, Kaivalya they call it. And at no point are they saying that this is supplemental, as Shankara would say, and after this you have to go to Shankara and then the direct path. No. If you see the Patanjali Yoga Sutra, they say it's a standalone text. You become enlightened by following this. So by karma yoga, by bhakti yoga, by dhyana or raja yoga, by jnana yoga, by one or more or all of these, be free. That is the whole of religion, spirituality, books, temples, doctrines, churches. They're all secondary details. They're all helps. But this attainment of spiritual freedom, this attainment of God, whichever way you put it, this is the goal.
I think, Swamiji, I know you're just doing your job as a monk by spreading knowledge, whatever you learned from your guru, from your lineage. But I would just like to end this by saying that you don't know that the reason why millions of people across the world love you so much is because you evidently are not fanatic about just, for example, Advaita Vedanta being right and the only path. You're not here to say that,
left to myself, I would love to be fanatic about Advaita Vedanta, because that's my home tradition, and it's something that I really appreciate, really love, and I'm really it's like
very close to your
it's very close to my heart. And however, I am a monk of the Ramakrishna order, and I am devoted to Sri Ramakrishna, Ma Sharada, Vivekananda. There is no way of being fanatical, because they are so universal. And the tradition which stands behind them, all of Sanatana Dharma and Hinduism, You see, over the millennia, it has been so universal, so vast, so diverse. It's one culture with so much diversity. Somebody pointed out to me, it's wrong to say that in India we have many cultures. No, we actually have one culture which celebrates diversity. So how can you be fanatical?
And I think that's what makes you who you are and why people love you so much. So I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the show. You don't know how much this means to me. I was literally begging you to come here, and you have a flight to New York tonight because you are. I just can't say in words, but this is very, very special to me.
Sit under the tree with you again and talk about it.
Yes, and when we're back in New York, then we will do another podcast there as well.
Good.
Thank you so much.
Take care, everybody. Namaste.
If you guys like this episode, please do subscribe for more podcasts coming your way. This would really mean a lot to me because you subscribing would mean us getting more guests on the show and having more interesting conversations. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much.